What if one single moment, one simple choice, could shatter the reality, you know? For Leo Carter, life was an endless cycle of polished silverware and fake smiles serving the city's elite, while his own dreams and his sister's health withered away. He was invisible, a ghost in an apron. But one rainy Tuesday, when a woman with eyes like a winter storm and a presence that silenced the room walked in, everything changed. He wasn't a hero, he was just a waiter. But when faced with cruelty, he chose kindness, an act so small yet so profound it would plunge him into a hidden world of savage power, ancient bloodlines, and a love that could either save him or tear him to pieces. The Gilded Spoon wasn't a restaurant, it was a theatre. Every night the same play was performed. The wealthy patrons were the stars, their laughter and clinking glasses the score. And Leo Carter, like the rest of the staff, was just part of the set, dressing a silent moving prop designed to be efficient and invisible. He was a ghost in a starched black apron, his life a repeating loop of "Right away, sir," and "Is there anything else I can get for you, madam?" For 3 years this had been his world. The pay was just enough to cover the rent on his cramped apartment, and more importantly, the escalating cost of his younger sister Amelia's medication. Amelia was his sun, his moon, his entire sky. A congenital heart condition had tethered her to a life of caution and quiet days, her vibrant spirit trapped in a fragile body. Her medical bills were a relentless tide, and Leo's job at the Gilded Spoon was the crumbling wall holding it back. Tonight was no different. The air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and entitlement. Leo moved between tables with a practiced grace, his posture perfect, his smile plastered on. Inside, he was counting, not just the tips, but the days until Amelia's next specialist appointment, the hours until he could go home and read to her the seconds until this shift was over. He was an expert at dissociation, at separating the smiling waiter from the weary man underneath. "Waiter!" The snap of fingers cut through the din. Leo turned his smile never faltering and approached the table of Mr. Alastair Finch, a real estate mogul with a face like a clenched fist. "Yes, Mr. Finch. This steak, it's medium. I distinctly recall asking for medium rare." Finch poked at the perfectly cooked piece of Wagyu as if it were roadkill. Leo had taken the order himself. He remembered the man's exact words, his dismissive wave. He had watched the chef, a culinary artist named Antoine, prepare it with surgical precision. It was flawless. "My sincerest apologies, sir. I'll have the kitchen prepare a new one for you immediately." Leo said, his voice a smooth balm of professional courtesy. It was the path of least resistance. Arguing would only get him a complaint, and his manager, a weasel of a man named Julian, collected complaints like trophies. "See that you do, and be quick about it. My time is valuable." Finch grumbled, turning back to his companions without another glance at Leo. As Leo carried the plate back to the kitchen, he passed a table in the corner, one he wasn't serving. A woman sat there alone, observing the room. He had noticed her when she came in. It was impossible not to. While the other patrons glittered with manufactured glamour, she possessed an inherent, untamed elegance. She had long, dark hair that fell like a sheet of polished obsidian, and her eyes were a startling shade of silver grey, like a sky just before a blizzard. They seemed to see everything right down to the bone. She wasn't just watching the play, she was analysing it, and for a fleeting, unnerving moment, her gaze met his. Leo felt a jolt, a flicker of recognition for the exhaustion he kept so carefully hidden. He quickly looked away, his heart hammering, for no reason he could name. Back in the kitchen's controlled chaos, Antoine glared at the rejected plate. "What is wrong with it?" the chef demanded, in his thick French accent. "He says it's medium, not medium rare," Leo said quietly. Antoine swore, snatching the plate. He knew, and Leo knew, that it was a power play. Finch enjoyed making people scurry. It was part of the price of his meal. "This man," Antoine muttered, gesturing with his tongs, "he has the palate of a goat." Leo simply nodded and waited. While the new steak sizzled, he thought of Amelia. He pictured her small smile, the way she would meticulously paint tiny, fantastical creatures in her sketchbook. That image was his armor. For her, he could endure the condescension of men like Finch. For her, he could be a ghost. When the new steak was ready, plated to perfection once more, Leo carried it out. As he set it down, Mr. Finch didn't even look up. "About time," was all he said. Later that evening, as the dinner rush began to ebb, Leo was clearing a table near the entrance. The rain that had been threatening all day had finally broken, lashing against the large glass windows of the restaurant. An old man, soaked to the bone and shivering, huddled under the restaurant's awning, trying to shield himself from the downpour. He held a tattered cardboard sign that Leo couldn't read from inside. He was invisible to the patrons, a piece of the city's grim scenery they chose to ignore. But Julian, the manager, noticed. His thin lips curled in disgust. He strode to the door and flung it open. "Get out of here!" he snarled, his voice cutting through the restaurant's ambiance. "You're a disgrace. You're driving away customers." The old man flinched, trying to stand on trembling legs. "Please, sir, just for a moment." "The rain. I don't care about the rain. Go on, get lost." Julian made a shooing motion, as if the man were a stray dog. Something inside Leo snapped. It was the casual cruelty, the utter lack of empathy. He saw in the old man's weary eyes the same desperation he felt every single day. He thought of what it would be like if he and Amelia had no one, if they were out on that street. Before he could stop himself, he was moving. He walked past a stunned Julian and stepped out into the rain, not even flinching as the cold water soaked his thin uniform. He crouched down beside the old man, who looked up at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Sir," Leo said, his voice gentle. "Are you hungry?" The man could only nod his teeth, chattering. Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He took out the $40 he had his grocery money for the rest of the week and pressed it into the man's hand. "There's a diner just 2 blocks down. Oh, it's warm. Please go get yourself a hot meal and a coffee." Tears welled in the old man's eyes, mingling with the rain on his wrinkled cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered the words thick with emotion. "God bless you." Leo simply nodded, a lump forming in his own throat. As the old man shuffled off into the rain, clutching the money, Leo stood up. He turned to face the restaurant and saw 2 things at once. The first was Julian's face, contorted with rage. The second was the woman with silver eyes. She was standing now, her gaze fixed on him, and her expression was one of unreadable, piercing intensity. The entire restaurant had gone quiet, and for the first time everyone was looking at the ghost in the apron. Leo knew with a sinking certainty that he had just lost his job. The silence that followed stretched into a taut, uncomfortable eternity. It was broken by Julian, whose voice was a low, venomous hiss. "Carter, my office. Now." Leo's shoulders slumped. This was it. He gave one last, involuntary glance toward the woman with the storm-grey eyes. She hadn't moved. Her focus was entirely on him, a silent, powerful weight in the room. He turned and walked toward the manager's office, the sound of his own footsteps echoing the final beats of his employment. Julian's office was as small and unpleasant as the man himself. He slammed the door, the sound making Leo flinch. "What in God's name do you think you were doing?" Julian spat, his face flushed. Have you lost your mind? That was a spectacle. You humiliated me. You made the establishment look like a soup kitchen. He was cold, Julian. He was hungry. Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow dread. Amelia's medicine. The rent. I don't pay you to have a conscience, Julian shrieked, stabbing a finger at Leo's chest. I pay you to take orders, smile and stay out of sight. You took your week's grocery money, pathetic as it is, and gave it to that filth in front of everyone. You're a liability, Carter. A sentimental fool. You're fired. Get your things and get out. Your final check will be mailed. The words, though expected, hit him like a physical blow. Fired. The one thread he was clinging to had been cut. He simply nodded, too numb to argue, too defeated to protest. He turned, opened the office door, and walked out into the restaurant. The patrons were back to their meals, the brief interruption already forgotten, another fleeting scene in their nightly play. He was once again invisible. He walked to the staff locker room, in a daze, changing out of his uniform, the apron, the starched shirt, for the last time. Each movement felt heavy, surreal. He pulled on his worn jacket, the fabric thin against the chill that had settled deep in his bones. As he walked out the back alley door, the rain greeted him like an old friend, plastering his hair to his forehead. He didn't have bus fare, so he started the long walk home, each step heavier than the last. How was he going to tell Amelia? He had just turned the corner onto the main street when a long black car, so sleek and silent it seemed to absorb the light around it, pulled up beside him. The tinted rear window glided down. Inside sat the woman with the silver eyes. "Get in, Mr. Carter," she said. Her voice was like her presence, calm, deep and commanding. It wasn't a request. Leo froze, rainwater dripping from his nose. I don't understand. You're walking home in a downpour, you've just been fired, and you look like you could use a ride. She stated, her expression unreadable. My name is Serafina Varg. Please get in. Hesitation warred with a strange, inexplicable pull. This woman radiated an aura of power far beyond anyone he'd ever met, even the arrogant billionaires at the Gilded Spoon. There was a stillness about her, a predatory grace that was both captivating and terrifying. But he was also soaked jobless and utterly lost. With a sense of fatalism, he walked around the car and slid into the plush leather interior. The inside of the car was silent and warm. The clamor of the city faded away, as if they were in a different world. Serafina watched him for a moment, her grey eyes seeming to catalogue every detail. What you did back there, she began, her voice soft but resonant, was foolish. Leo's stomach dropped. I know, it cost me my job. It was also honourable. She continued, a flicker of something, was it approval in her eyes. Kindness without expectation of reward is the rarest currency in this world. You have a great capacity for it. Leo didn't know how to respond. He just stared at her, mesmerized. Up close, he could see the faint flecks of a darker grey in her irises, like storm clouds gathering. She was ethereally beautiful, but it was a dangerous, wild kind of beauty, like a perfectly forged blade. Where do you live, Leo? She asked, her use of his first name startling him. He gave her the address, and she relayed it to the driver, in a language he didn't recognize. It was guttural and melodic at the same time. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights smearing through the rain-streaked windows. That man you worked for, Julian, is a small man who delights in the small power he has, she said suddenly. The world is full of them. They are like yapping dogs, loud and irritating, but ultimately harmless. He didn't seem harmless when he fired me, Leo said with a bitter laugh. His actions have consequences, as do yours. she replied cryptically. "Tell me about your sister Amelia." Leo's blood ran cold. How do you know about Amelia?" A faint smile touched Seraphina's lips. It didn't quite reach her eyes. "I make it my business to know about people who interest me. You have interested me, Leo Carter. Her heart condition requires medication that is expensive. Without your job, you won't be able to afford it." This was too much. The shock and fear were coiling in his gut. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice shaking slightly. "I am someone offering you a solution," she said, ignoring his question. She reached into the compartment beside her and pulled out a simple, elegant black business card. She handed it to him. It was made of a heavy textured stock. It read, "Seraphina Varg, Blackwood Manor." Below the name was a phone number. There was no title, no company name. "I am in need of a personal assistant at my family's estate," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "The work is demanding, but the compensation is significant, enough to provide your sister with the best medical care in the country, with plenty to spare." Leo stared at the card, then back at her. It felt like a dream, a feverish hallucination brought on by stress and despair. "An assistant, I'm a waiter. I don't have any experience." "I am not hiring you for your experience," Seraphina said, her gaze intense. "I am hiring you for your character, for what you did tonight for a man who had nothing to give you in return. In my world, such a quality is worth more than any resume." The car slowed to a stop in front of his run-down apartment building. The offer hung in the air between them, shimmering with impossibility. It was a lifeline, but a lifeline thrown from a ship he couldn't see into waters he didn't know. "The decision is yours," she said. "Call the number tomorrow if you accept. A car will be sent for you. But know this, if you accept, your old life is over. The world you will be entering is not the one you think you know." Without another word, she pressed a button, and the door beside Leo unlocked. He stumbled out of the car, the business card clutched in his hand. The black car pulled away from the curb as silently as it had arrived, disappearing into the rainy night. Leo stood on the pavement, soaked and shivering, staring at the empty space where it had been. He looked down at the card. Blackwood Manor. It sounded less like a home and more like a myth. His life was in shambles, but for the first time all night, a tiny, dangerous spark of hope ignited within him. Leo stood in the rain for a full minute, the card feeling impossibly heavy in his hand. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. The world you will be entering is not the one you think you know. The words were a warning, a clear red flag. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to throw the card into the nearest puddle and forget this ever happened. This was the stuff of fantasy, of deals with the devil whispered in shadowed alleyways. But then the image of Amelia's face flashed in his mind, her pale skin the slight blue tinge to her lips when she was tired, the ever-present stack of orange prescription bottles on her nightstand. He thought of the letter from the insurance company he'd been hiding from her, the one that mentioned they would no longer cover the full cost of her next experimental treatment. Rationality was a luxury he couldn't afford. He trudged up the 3 flights of stairs to his apartment, the building smelling of damp carpets and boiled cabbage. He opened the door as quietly as he could. Amelia was asleep on the couch, a book resting on her chest, and a half-finished sketch of a griffin on the coffee table. He gently lifted the book, placed a blanket over her, and kissed her forehead. Her breathing was shallow, a constant, fragile rhythm that was the soundtrack to his life. He retreated to his own small room, sat on the edge of his lumpy mattress, and stared at the card. Seraphina Varg, Blackwood Manor. He couldn't find anything about her or the estate online. It was a digital ghost. The lack of information was more unsettling than a bad review. He didn't sleep. He spent the night weighing the familiar, soul-crushing struggle against the terrifying, unknown promise. By the time the grey morning light filtered through his dirty window, he had made his choice. He wasn't choosing for himself. He was choosing for Amelia. At precisely 9 o'clock, his hand trembling, he dialed the number. It was answered on the first ring. A man with a deep, gravelly voice spoke a single word. "Yes. Hello," Leo stammered. "My name is Leo Carter. I was given this number by Ms. Serafina Varg." There was a pause. "We are aware," the voice rumbled. "Have you made your decision?" I accept her offer." The words felt momentous, like a vow. "A car will be at your location in 1 hour. Pack what is essential. You will not be returning." The line went dead. 1 hour. The finality of it sent a new wave of panic through him. He scribbled a hasty note for Amelia, one he hated writing. He told her a vague truth that he'd been offered a sudden incredible job, managing a private estate far from the city, that it was a live-in position, and that the pay would solve all their problems. He promised the first thing he would do was arrange for a specialist to see her, and that he would call her the second he was settled. He taped an envelope with the last of his cash to the note, his heart aching with every word he wrote. He was lying by omission, shielding her from a truth he didn't even understand himself. He packed a single duffel bag with clothes, a few worn paperbacks, and a small framed photo of him and Amelia laughing in a park years ago. Exactly 1 hour later, the same silent black car from the night before was waiting at his curb. The driver was a mountain of a man with a bald head and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He didn't speak, simply took Leo's bag and opened the door. The journey was long, taking them out of the city and deep into the countryside. The urban sprawl gave way to rolling hills, then dense, ancient forests. The trees grew taller and thicker, their branches interlocking overhead until the road became a green-tinged tunnel. There were no other cars, no signs of civilization. After nearly 3 hours, they turned onto an unpaved road, marked by 2 massive moss-covered stone pillars. A wrought-iron gate, adorned with the snarling visage of a wolf, silently swung open for them. They were on the grounds of Blackwood Manor. The estate was a sprawling Gothic masterpiece of dark stone and towering spires nestled in the heart of the forest, like a sleeping beast. It was beautiful and deeply intimidating. Ivy clung to the walls and stern-looking gargoyles perched on the roof, their stony eyes seeming to follow the car as it crunched up the gravel driveway. The driver, who Leo now knew was named Gunnar, led him inside. The interior was as imposing as the exterior. A grand hall with a vaulted ceiling soared above them, dark wood paneling covered the walls, and a colossal stone fireplace dominated one end of the room. A fire roared within it, casting dancing shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. The air smelled of wood smoke, old leather, and something else. Something wild and musky like the forest floor after a rain. Serafina was waiting for him, standing before the fire. She was dressed not in the elegant attire from the restaurant, but in practical riding breeches and a simple linen shirt. She looked less like a businesswoman and more like the lady of a feudal manor. "Leo, welcome to Blackwood," she said, her silver eyes appraising him. "Gunnar will show you to your quarters. Settle in. We will discuss the terms of your employment this evening." Gunnar led him up a winding staircase and down a long hall lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women who all shared Serafina's intense, penetrating gaze. They were the Varg ancestors, and their painted eyes followed him with silent judgment. His room was larger than his entire apartment, with a heavy 4-poster bed, a small fireplace, and a window that overlooked the endless brooding forest. That evening, Leo was summoned to a library that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle. Bookshelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound tomes. Serafina sat behind a massive oak desk, a leather portfolio in front of her. "My father, Valerius, is the head of our family and our business interests," she explained, her voice all business. "You will be working directly for me. Your duties will be varied. You will manage my schedule, accompany me to meetings, handle correspondence, and oversee certain household logistics. You will live on the estate. You are expected to be discreet, loyal, and available at all times." She slid a document across the desk. It was a contract. "This outlines your salary and benefits. It is generous." Leo scanned the page. The salary figure was staggering. It was more money than he could have earned in 20 years at the Gilded Spoon. It included a comprehensive health plan that would cover every possible treatment for Amelia, no questions asked. There was a catch. There had to be. He found it at the bottom. "There is a non-disclosure agreement," Serafina said, noticing where his eyes had landed. "It is permanent and binding. You will not speak of what you see or hear within the walls of this estate to anyone. Ever. The Varg family values its privacy above all else. Breaking this agreement will have severe consequences." Leo looked up from the contract and into her eyes. That wild, untamed quality was there again, a flicker of something ancient and predatory just beneath the surface. He was making a deal, signing away more than just his time. He was signing away his old life, his freedom to speak, perhaps even his safety. But the number on that page, the number that represented Amelia's future, burned in his mind. He picked up the pen. "I understand." He signed his name, the scratch of the nib on the thick paper, sounding unnervingly loud in the silent room. "Good," Serafina said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. She closed the portfolio. "Your duties begin tomorrow. Get some rest. And Leo," she added, as he turned to leave, "a word of advice. Stay out of the woods after dark. They belong to us." Leo's first few weeks at Blackwood Manor were a disorienting blend of opulence and strangeness. On the surface, his job was that of any high-level personal assistant. He managed Serafina's schedule, which was a whirlwind of video conferences with financial firms in Zurich and Tokyo meetings with gruff-looking men who looked more like security contractors than businessmen, and long solitary hours spent poring over geological surveys and shipping manifests. The Varg family's business was vast, with interests in everything from mining to global logistics, all managed from this isolated Gothic fortress. But beneath the corporate veneer, the rhythm of life at the manor was distinctly primal. The staff from Gunner, the driver to the quiet housekeepers, all moved with a quiet, coiled energy. They were fiercely loyal to the Varg family and regarded Leo with a polite but distinct curiosity, like a strange animal brought into their den. They were all incredibly physically fit, and he often saw them engaging in punishing training exercises on the lawn, sparring, running for miles into the forest, their stamina seemingly limitless. The family itself was even more intense. Valerius Varg, the patriarch, was a terrifying figure. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a mane of silver hair and Serafina's storm-grey eyes. Only his were colder, harder. He spoke rarely, but when he did, his voice was a low growl that commanded absolute obedience. He treated Leo with a detached, almost clinical indifference, his gaze often lingering on Leo, as if assessing a flaw in his daughter's judgment. Then there was Kyle. Kyle was another young member of the family, though his relation to Serafina was unclear. He was handsome in a brutal, angular way, with black hair, piercing blue eyes, and a permanent sneer etched on his face. From the moment Leo arrived, Kyle treated him with open hostility. He would shoulder-check Leo in the hallways, make snide comments about his soft hands and city smell, and constantly challenge his presence. "I don't know what she sees in you, waiter." Kyle had sneered one afternoon, cornering Leo in the hall. The air around him seemed to crackle with aggression. "You're weak. You don't belong here. This is no place for your kind." "Kale, that's enough." Serafina's voice, cool and sharp, cut in from down the hall. Kyle immediately straightened up, the aggression in his eyes banking into a sullen fire. He shot Leo one last look of pure venom before stalking away. "Pay him no mind," Serafina told Leo, though her own expression was troubled. "Kyle is traditional. He is resistant to change." It was in his moments with Serafina that Leo felt the strangest pull. A connection was forming between them, an undeniable current of attraction. He saw a different side of her than the cool executive or the intimidating lady of the manor. He saw it when she was training, moving with a fluid, lethal grace that was breathtaking. He saw it when they would walk the grounds, and she would tell him the names of the ancient trees, her voice softening. He saw a deep-seated loneliness in her, the burden of the power she wielded. She, in turn, seemed fascinated by his humanity. She would ask him questions about his life, about Amelia, about his dreams of being an architect, a dream he'd long since buried. She listened with an intensity that made him feel seen for the first time in years. "You feel things so directly," she said once, as they stood on a balcony overlooking the vast, dark forest. "Your emotions are close to the surface. For us, everything is buried deeper under layers of instinct and control." The strangeness of the manor was becoming harder to ignore. The family ate prodigious amounts of meat, almost always rare. Their senses were unnervingly acute. Serafina could hear him approaching a room long before he arrived, and Valerius seemed to be able to smell his moods. And then there were the nights of the full moon. On his first one, a palpable tension gripped the manor. The staff became edgy and silent. The family disappeared entirely after sunset. Leo was strictly instructed by a grim-faced gunner to lock his door and not leave his room for any reason until sunrise. That night, sleep was impossible. The forest, usually alive with the gentle sounds of nature, erupted into a chorus of deep, guttural howls. It wasn't the yipping of coyotes. It was the sound of massive, powerful predators, a sound that resonated deep in Leo's bones and triggered a primal fear he'd never known. He crept to his window and looked out. The moon was a perfect luminous circle bathing the forest in an eerie silver light. For a moment, he saw movement at the edge of the trees, large, dark shapes moving with impossible speed and grace. They were too big to be wolves, bigger than any animal he had ever seen. He blinked, and they were gone. The next morning, the family reappeared. They were exhausted, but filled with a vibrant electric energy. Kyle had a fresh, deep scratch on his cheek, and Serafina's eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so impossible, so insane, that his mind refused to accept it. The wolf motifs on the gate, the howling, the superhuman abilities, the scent of something wild that clung to them all. It was the stuff of folklore, of whispered stories, told around a fire. One evening he was working late in the library organizing some files for Serafina. He cut his hand on a sharp edge of a metal filing cabinet. It was a deep, nasty gash, and blood welled up, instantly dripping onto the antique rug. Before he could even react, Serafina was there. She had been across the room, her back to him, but she moved with a silent, impossible speed, appearing at his side in a blur. Her head snapped toward the scent of his blood, her nostrils flaring, and her eyes. Her silver-grey eyes were glowing, Not a trick of the light, but a soft, luminous internal fire. The pupils had elongated, becoming almost slit-like. A low, guttural growl rumbled in her chest, a sound that was not human. She stared at the blood on his hand with a terrifying, hungry intensity. Leo froze, his heart seizing in his chest. He wasn't looking at Serafina Varg, the powerful executive. He was looking at a predator, and he was her prey. Time seemed to slow down, stretching into an unbearable silent moment. The air in the library grew thick, charged with a primal energy that radiated from Serafina. Leo could only stare, mesmerized and terrified, at the luminous silver of her eyes. The growl in her chest vibrated through the floorboards. Her focus was locked on the blood beading on his hand. Her body tensed like a wolf about to spring. He saw the struggle on her face. Her features, usually so composed, were tight with a ferocious internal battle. Her lips pulled back slightly, revealing the tips of canines that looked unnaturally sharp. "Serafina," he whispered, his voice trembling. His voice seemed to break the spell. She blinked hard, and the otherworldly glow in her eyes receded, leaving behind the familiar stormy grey, now wide with shock and something that looked like self-loathing. She took a staggering step back, her chest heaving as if she had just finished a frantic run. "Get out!" she breathed, her voice raspy and strained. She wouldn't look at him. She stared at the bloodstain on the rug as if it were poison. "But your eyes, they were—" "I said, get out!" The command was a roar, a wave of pure power that slammed into him. It was the voice of an alpha, a command that bypassed reason and went straight to the instinct for survival. Leo stumbled backward, his own body reacting before his mind could, and fled the library. He didn't stop until he was in his room, the door locked securely behind him. He leaned against it, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. His mind raced, trying to process the impossible. The glowing eyes, the growl, the inhuman speed, the howls on the full moon, Kyle's animalistic aggression, the family's heightened senses. It wasn't a secret. It was a species. He splashed cold water on his face from the basin in his bathroom, his hand still throbbing. He wrapped it clumsily in a handkerchief. Werewolf. The word was absurd, a fantasy, but the evidence was undeniable, confirmed by the primal terror he had just witnessed in Serafina's eyes and felt in his own soul. He was living in a den of monsters. Beautiful, sophisticated, powerful monsters. He spent the rest of the night in a state of agitated fear. Every creak of the old manor, every sigh of the wind outside sounded like a predator stalking him. He had signed a contract, a non-disclosure agreement. What were the severe consequences for learning their greatest secret? He thought of Amelia, safe and sound, her new treatments already scheduled thanks to the Varg fortune. He was trapped. Fleeing would mean abandoning her. Staying could mean, what being food? The next day, a heavy silence permeated the manor. Serafina did not summon him. He didn't see her or any of the other family members. It was as if he had been excommunicated. The staff treated him with the same professional courtesy, but their eyes held a new wariness. They knew that he knew. Late in the afternoon, Kyle found him. Leo was in the garden trying to clear his head when Kyle appeared before him as if from nowhere. "So the little human pet has finally seen the truth," Kyle sneered, circling him slowly. "Are you scared? You should be." "Leave me alone, Kyle," Leo said, trying to keep his voice steady. Kyle laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She broke the law for you, the pact. Never reveal our nature to a human. Valerius is furious. She's compromised us all for a weakling who smells of fear." He lunged forward, grabbing the front of Leo's shirt, and slamming him against the stone wall of the garden. The strength was incredible. Leo felt like he'd been hit by a car. "I can snap your neck before you could even scream." Kyle growled, his face inches from Leo's, his blue eyes blazing with hatred. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't silence you right now and clean up Serafina's mess." Leo's mind went blank with terror. He could feel Kyle's raw power, the promise of violence, humming off him in waves. "Because you would have to go through me." Serafina's voice cut through the tension. She stood at the entrance to the garden, her face pale, but her expression resolute. She walked toward them, her movements deliberate and dangerous. "This is pack business. Serafina." Kyle snarled, not releasing Leo. "He's a threat. He is under my protection," she stated, her voice dropping to a low warning growl that made the hair on Leo's arm stand up. "Release him. Now." For a tense moment, the two of them were locked in a battle of wills. Kyle's jaw was tight, his knuckles white where he gripped Leo's shirt. But Serafina's gaze was unyielding, filled with the same alpha command he had heard the night before. With a final curse, Kyle shoved Leo away. Leo stumbled, catching his balance on the wall. "You're a fool!" Kyle spat at Serafina. "Bringing this weakness into our home will be the death of us." He turned and stormed away. Leo was left alone with Serafina. He was still shaking. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft, now laced with concern. He just looked at her, the questions and the fear churning inside him. "It's true, isn't it, all of it?" She met his gaze without flinching. "Yes," she said quietly. "We are lichens, werewolves as your stories call us. This is who we are." The simple, honest confession was more staggering than any denial would have been. "My family, our pack, the Blackwood Pack, has existed for centuries," she continued, her voice a low murmur. "We live by a strict set of laws to protect our existence, the most important of which is secrecy, a secrecy I broke when I lost control." "Why?" Leo asked, the single word encompassing everything. "Why me? Why bring me here?" She took a step closer, her silver eyes filled with a raw vulnerability he had never seen before. "Because from the moment I saw you, I saw something our kind has begun to lose. In our world of dominance, strength, and survival, we forget compassion. We forget the quiet strength of kindness. You acted to help a stranger, expecting nothing, risking everything you had. I needed that light in my world. It was a selfish choice, and I have put you in terrible danger." She reached out her hand, hovering just before she touched his cheek. Her skin was warm. "I am sorry, Leo, for the fear I have caused you. You are free to go. I will give you enough money to care for Amelia for the rest of her life. No one will harm you. I give you my word." The offer was there, the escape he had craved just hours before. He could walk away back to the human world and leave this nightmare behind. He looked into her eyes at the woman, the wolf who was offering him his freedom, even though it was clear it would cost her dearly. And in that moment, he realized his fear was being eclipsed by something else, something far more complicated and powerful. He didn't see a monster. He saw Serafina. Leo didn't take the offer. The thought of leaving, of returning to a world that suddenly seemed muted and grey, without the vibrant, dangerous intensity of Blackwood Manor, felt like a betrayal. It wasn't just about the money for Amelia anymore. It was about Serafina. His fear was real, but the connection he felt with her was stronger. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice firm with a conviction that surprised even himself. A flicker of disbelief, followed by a wave of profound relief, washed over Serafina's features. For the first time, she let a genuine, unguarded smile touch her lips. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met," she whispered, "or the most foolish." "Probably both," Leo admitted. His decision sent ripples through the pack. Valeria summoned him to his study. The Alpha regarded him with his cold, calculating eyes, the air thick with his disapproval. "You have been shown our deepest secret, human," Valerius growled. "A secret we have killed to protect. My daughter has acted recklessly, yet you choose to stay. This is not your world. You do not have the instincts, the strength, the teeth for it. You are a sheep who has chosen to live amongst wolves." "I'm here for your daughter," Leo said, meeting his gaze directly. "And I am not as fragile as you think." Valerius was silent for a long time. "Prove it," he said at last, dismissing him with a wave. The chance to do just that came sooner and more violently than anyone could have anticipated. Kyle's words had been prophetic. Leo's presence, a human living openly amongst the Blackwood pack, had not gone unnoticed. Other packs, rival packs, were always watching, sniffing for weakness, for any crack in the armor of their competitors. The Crimson Fang pack, led by a notoriously brutal alpha named Marcus Thorne, saw their opening. Thorne was a sadist who believed humans were nothing more than cattle, and that the Varg family's business dealings in the human world had made them soft. The news of a human living at Blackwood Manor was the perfect pretext for an attack he had long been planning. The assault came without warning on a moonless night. The estate's perimeter alarms shrieked a jarring electronic sound that was quickly drowned out by the roar of dozens of enraged werewolves. Leo was woken from his sleep by the sound of shattering glass and a war cry that was half human, half beast. Panic seized him, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of adrenaline. He threw on his clothes and ran from his room. The hallways were chaos. Pack members already in their half-shifted forms, eyes glowing, claws, extended fangs bared, were racing towards the entrance. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and bloodlust. He found Seraphina near the Grand Hall directing the defense. She was already transformed a magnificent and terrifying creature. She was larger than any wolf he could have imagined, with fur the color of midnight, and her signature silver eyes burning with feral intelligence. She moved with lethal grace, a true alpha, her commands coming as a series of sharp, guttural barks that her pack obeyed instantly. She saw him, and for a second, her fierce expression softened with alarm. Her voice wasn't spoken. It was a command that echoed directly in his mind, a phenomenon he had no time to question. But Leo didn't move. He watched as the Crimson Fang wolves, a mangy and battle-scarred horde, crashed through the doors and windows. The battle was immediate and savage. It was a whirlwind of claws and teeth of snarling beasts tearing into each other, with a ferocity that defied belief. He was useless here. Valerius was right. He was a sheep. As the fighting spilled further into the manor, he saw one of Thorne's wolves break from the main fight and charge up the main staircase. It was headed for the upper floors towards the non-combatants, towards the wing where Amelia would have been housed if she were here. He saw Gunnar intercepted, locked in a deadly struggle with two other invaders. No one else saw the lone wolf, except him. Leo didn't think. He acted. He sprinted not for safety, but for the kitchen. His mind, the human mind that Valerius had dismissed, was racing. He couldn't fight them with strength, but maybe he could fight them with fire. He grabbed a large bottle of high-proof cooking brandy from the pantry and a box of matches. His hands shook, but his purpose was clear. He ran back out and up a secondary servant's staircase, his heart pounding in his ears. He emerged on the second-floor landing, just as the Crimson Fang wolf reached the top of the main stairs. It was a monstrous thing with matted red fur and crazed yellow eyes. It saw him and snarled saliva dripping from its jaws. It charged. Leo didn't have time to be scared. He uncapped the bottle, splashed the flammable liquid all over the heavy velvet curtains that lined the hallway, and tossed the rest of the bottle at the charging beast. The wolf, surprised, was doused in the alcohol. In the split second that gave him, Leo struck a match. With a desperate prayer, he threw the lit match at the curtains. They erupted in a sheet of flame. The fire raced along the alcohol-soaked fabric and leaped onto the drenched wolf. The creature's snarl turned into a high-pitched scream of agony as it was engulfed in flames. It thrashed wildly, a living inferno, before collapsing to the floor. Leo stood, breathing heavily, the heat of the fire on his face, his hand still shaking from holding the match. He had done it. He had killed a werewolf. The distraction worked better than he could have hoped. The sight and smell of the burning wolf and the fire now spreading rapidly across the upper landing caused a moment of chaos and confusion among the invading pack. It was the opening the Blackwood defenders needed. Led by a furious Valerius and a devastatingly efficient Seraphina, they rallied, driving the stunned Crimson Fangs back. Marcus Thorne, seeing his advantage lost and his forces dwindling, sounded the retreat. The remaining invaders fled back into the darkness of the forest. As the last of them disappeared, the Blackwood pack, bloody and battered, but victorious, turned their attention to the fire. They worked with disciplined efficiency to contain it. Seraphina, having shifted back into her human form, raced up the stairs. She found Leo, standing amidst the smoke and chaos, his face smudged with soot, staring at the charred remains of the wolf. She stopped in front of him, taking in the scene, the burned curtains, the dead enemy, the human who was still standing. Her silver eyes were wide with a mixture of shock, awe, and overwhelming pride. He looked at her, his heart still racing. "I couldn't just hide," he said, his voice hoarse. She didn't speak. Instead, she closed the distance between them and pulled him into a fierce embrace, her arms wrapped around him as if she would never let him go. In the middle of the smoking, battle-scarred hallway of Blackwood Manor, surrounded by her pack, she kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, possessive, claiming kiss, the kiss of an alpha choosing her mate. And Leo the waiter, the ghost in the apron, kissed her back no longer, a sheep among wolves, but a man who had found his own way to bare his teeth. In the battle's aftermath, a new energy settled over the battered manor respect. As the pack members shifted back to their human forms, their eyes fell on Leo, not as an outsider, but as an ally. Even Kyle, nursing a wounded arm, offered a single grudging nod, a gesture of acceptance more potent than any words. Valerius Varg approached his imposing presence, silencing the room. He surveyed the damage, his cold gaze finally settling on Leo, who stood steadfastly by Seraphina's side. The Crimson Fangs saw a human and smelled weakness, the Alpha's voice rumbled. They were wrong. You didn't run. You used the tools you hadn't claws but courage. You have bled for this pack. Valerius looked from Leo to his daughter, a final decision made. He is your choice, Seraphina, your mate. The pack accepts him. The words sealed Leo's fate, binding him not with chains of fear, but with ties of family. His life at Blackwood Manor was transformed. He was no longer just an assistant. He was Seraphina's partner, a valued voice in the Pack Council, whose human ingenuity was seen as a strategic asset. He fulfilled his most important promise with the Varg's resources. Amelia received a life-saving surgery, granting her a healthy future he had once only dreamed of providing. Months later, Leo stood with Seraphina on a balcony overlooking the vast forest, the quiet comfort between them, a testament to the life they had built. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "Your old life?" Leo thought of the weary, invisible waiter he used to be. He looked at the powerful, beautiful woman beside him and felt the thrum of his new family within the manor walls. "No," he said with absolute certainty. "I was never really alive until I came here. One act of kindness changed everything." She turned her silver eyes glowing softly in the twilight. "It wasn't just kindness, Leo," she whispered. "It was your strength. It was always more than enough." As she kissed him, a lone wolf howled in the distance, not a sound of menace but a song of homecoming. Leo's journey proves that the greatest strength isn't always found in sharp teeth or brute force, but in the courage of a kind heart. From the polished floors of a luxury restaurant to the ancient wild heart of a werewolf pack, his life was completely rewritten by a single choice to show compassion when no one was watching. He didn't just find a new job or a new home, he found a new family, a powerful love, and most importantly, the truest version of himself. He learned that even in a world of savage secrets and primal power, the one thing that can truly change your destiny forever is an act of kindness. If you were captivated by Leo and Serafina's story, don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with a friend who loves a story where the underdog comes out on top. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss another thrilling adventure. What was your favorite moment? Let us know in the comments below.